Hey there, I'm Rory Foster with Common Ground International, and I am so glad to share this information with you. If you are looking at the next few weeks, possibly month, maybe rest of your school year, and in the midst of this coronavirus outbreak, and being forced with the likelihood of having to teach online, I want to be able to share some information, resources, and tips with you. My wife and I founded Common Ground International back in 2001, so almost 2 decades ago now, and we are a language services and language training company. So we spend a lot of time in specific industries with Spanish and English language instruction, and then also providing a whole gamut of language services such as translation, interpretation, and things like that to our clients around the country. And so over the years, we have sort of moved our perspective and position from only face-to-face teaching to beginning to incorporate a little bit more online to now, as recently as this past January, moving to almost exclusively online instruction with the training piece of what we do as a company. And so I want to share with you how you can begin thinking about some approaches and things like that in order to help your transition to online if coronavirus has sent you home and you're trying to figure out, amidst all the other stresses of family and kids at home possibly, and just the daily angst of knowing there's a pandemic in your community. I want to help lighten the load a little bit with this whole new aspect of teaching. So first of all, there's no denying it. It is a major shift to teaching online, but you can do it. You can definitely do it. I'm not the smartest pencil in the box, and I figured it out, and I figured out how to do a good job with it. So, I was forced into teaching online this past January. We were dabbling in it, and we were, moving some of our lecture, if you will, not lecture, but didactic pieces of our courses to online so that the limited time that we had with our clients, we could really make them interactive and more communicative and things like that, really just maximize the face-to-face time we had with people. But then this past January, my primary instructor, asked for a substitute for the first couple of weeks of his class for the semester. And I was like, well, what's going on? The semester is starting up. Why would you need a substitute? And so after some frank conversations, we realized he was looking for another job. And so I said, oh my goodness, we gotta just cut this off now because, I might be out of the country with a travel program or something, and I can't cover for you if you're gonna get another job. So anyway, we spoke to all of our university clients, and thankfully they were understanding and said, yes, you could put your training online. But this was the beginning of the year, and I had classes starting in like 15 days, and I needed to put 4 courses worth of content online so that students could, get in there, do them, have an academic grading piece to it and everything. And it was a major push at the beginning of the year for us. But anyway, you can do this. It's totally possible. And I'm glad to be sharing some tips and tricks with you. So my objectives for this video is, first of all, not necessarily best practices, because you really, in a full-time way, I'm only a couple of months ahead of you. But what I can do is share some realistic perspectives and expectations with you, share some tips and a bit of technology and some flow of what the synchronous learning is going to be, which is when you're all live together online, and then some tips, text, and flow for asynchronous learning, which is what you're doing right now by watching this video. I pre-recorded it for you, and you're watching it on your own time, on your own terms, right? Some helpful resources, and then some next steps. So that's what we plan to do here in the next 10-15 minutes or so. So realistic perspectives for starters. It is more difficult to teach to all learning styles when you teach online. So it's a good idea to pay special attention to creative ways to serve those physical or kinesthetic learners that you have, and also those social interpersonal learners, because those are 2 learning styles or learning modalities that really get underrepresented in an online format. So every subject area is going to have its own unique challenges, and so we'll see down the road here that I'm going to really encourage you to be collaborating with your department colleagues or grade level colleagues, so that you guys can really come up with solutions that fit your students perfectly. it is best to run what we used to call, like a decade ago, I don't know if it's still a term in regular education circles, but we used to call it a flipped classroom, which is essentially you take all your didactic portion, put it online for people to consume on their own terms, and then the time you spend together is more collaborative, more conversational, more interactive. And so it's exclusively practice and application of the content. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, how to have that balance. So some expectations. Your students may not know how to learn online. In fact, I just had to admonish one of my classes here earlier this week because they were showing up to the live practice sessions unprepared and having to rely on their notes, and everything was really slow. They hadn't done the work prior, and I could see how some activity on how they do comments and things like that, and a lot of them were doing in the hour or two prior to our live session, and it's just not enough time to have that content get absorbed and get to a useful, place or ability. And so I had to admonish them, and I realized that it was really my shortcoming. I hadn't provided them with enough practical suggestions or step-by-step instructions and tips on how to learn the content. And so when I do this again, that's how I'm going to start this semester. It was really clear, here's how you can be successful. And don't wait for the last half hour before class to see the content. Students will be distracted at home. There's no way of getting around that. And they'll be distracted. They'll have family stuff going on. They will probably have internet connection interruptions, and they'll possibly have challenges finding the content that you want them to find. And so, the fact that students will be distracted and the fact that they will be in a new setting themselves, I think it's going to lead us as a group of professionals to thinking that, we really need to focus on what's most essential and not overburden students with things that are not completely 100% necessary. Just focus on the most important things, because they're going to be distracted. Families are going to be under stress. It's just not the same environment. So we need to pare everything back, I think. Find a way to make your assessments open book. You're going to have assessments that you do in this online setup, and there's really no way you could disagree with me on this, but in my perspective, there's no reason to give a kid the temptation or the stress of having to figure out if they're going to peek at their notes or not when they're doing whatever assessment it is they're doing. So just strip away that burden or that distraction, that obstacle, and let your stuff find a way to modify your assessments such that they're open book and they really assess your students' ability. Not everyone will have access to social media stuff. And so I know that one way that a lot of folks in the business community create private sort of work groups and things like that is through like private Facebook groups. Maybe not a great idea based on just availability and family preferences for social media and stuff like that. All right, some do's and don'ts. I was searching the web this week earlier as I was preparing to put this together for you. And what are the experts saying about what you should and shouldn't do as you are teaching online? And so I thought I'd share some with you. So do and don't. Definitely do asynchronous learning. That is the flipped classroom idea I was talking about. That is the give students something to consume on their own time, on their own terms, and then come together for the synchronous part, the live interaction part that you'll be delivering online. Don't rely on only synchronous learning. If you do, you will have very, very limited outcomes, really limited success, because people are so distracted when they're on an online meeting and things like that. So it's really a good idea to have content for people to consume on their own terms before they come together with you in your live practice session. So schedule online office hours. Don't set any 24/7 availability expectations. And that's really more of a self-care thing for you. You don't want to make yourself available. I mean, yeah, you're available. You do want to maybe, but there is so much going on right now with all of the extra work that you need to do to actually deliver content online. If you are constantly feeling obligated in yourself to respond to student questions, requests, etc., 24/7, you are going to get wiped out, and you'll get sick yourself just because you'll be so tired and so worn down. So schedule online office hours and stick to them, or have a certain number. Maybe there's an hour a day that you respond to emails or something, and then everything else you devote to your actual teaching work. And as long as your students know that this is the time of day they can contact you, I think that's a really important self-care thing for you to consider. So only require the essentials. Don't overload your students. We were talking earlier about how many distractions and how inefficient your kids are going to be as they're learning, or your students if you're teaching adults. They will be inefficient because they're probably new to learning online. So only require what's really most essential, and I think everyone will be a little healthier for it. So specify your expectations. Don't be too vague or too open-ended, because there's just less back and forth, natural back and forth like you would in a classroom. So be real specific to line out, this is 1, 2, 3, this is exactly what you're doing, and so that your students know exactly what to be working on. And very similarly, specify your lesson objectives, and don't give random activities. You know, your time that you have and the time that your kids are going to have to do this studying, we want to make sure that they're only focusing on what's important. So, you know, all the random extraneous stuff, just strip it away and focus really on the true objectives. I feel like I'm repeating myself quite a bit, but I think it's really important to pare back what we're doing. So some tips and tech for synchronous learning. So as far as audio goes, some things to keep in mind. Background noise. You cannot control what's going on in the student's environment. And if it's a family like mine, there's 3 kids trying to learn. And if they're all learning at the same time, they're all in something else. There's a dog running around, and there's just so many things going on. So there is going to be some background noise. Suggesting headphones and a microphone will be really helpful, because one thing that makes the audio quality of a meeting actually horrible is if everyone is using like the computer audio, and so their speakers are speaking and then it's picking up their mics as well. There just gets to be a ton of reverb and feedback within the meeting. And so require, if you can, if it's not a financial burden for your families or your students, to have some kind of headphone and microphone. Okay, so use a platform that provides, you know, quick control of participant audio. So you need to be able to mute students and like mute all at once, because you'll get into situations where there's like these weird digital noises, echoes and things, and you just need to mute and then bring people on one-to-one into the meeting and let them start speaking if you're doing some interactive stuff. So screen sharing is really important. Give your folks something to look at, and you know, it's your whiteboard, it's your online whiteboard. So we use Google Doc always we use a Google Doc, and you know, you can set your sharing settings such that your students can edit it if you want them to. You can set it such that they can only view it. However you want to do it, you set your sharing settings, and then you just send the link out right in your chat, and students can access it and be looking at the Google Doc and working on the Google Doc with you as a class. It's essentially like everyone's at the whiteboard at the same time, right? All right, I would suggest you avoid teaching through a PowerPoint or a keynote live. When you've got everyone in the meeting platform, now I'm doing it now asynchronous, not live, pre-recorded, but when you've got everyone live in your meeting platform and you're trying to run that presentation mode where you're walking through the steps of the slide, it becomes really burdensome, and it's hard to control, hard to see the students, hard to manage the chats, hard to do really everything when you're in that presentation mode. So I would suggest you don't do it. Avoid doing that. And all of your keynote stuff, make it part of the asynchronous piece of your teaching. So energy and flow. As far as energy and flow goes of your synchronous time together, the time that you're live together with each other, classroom energy, there's no classroom energy to feed off of. And that is a major adjustment. I don't know if you like to circle the classroom, walk around, check in on kids, and joke around a little bit or whatever. But that's one of the things that I miss the most of teaching online. There's very little classroom energy to feed off of, and it's also pretty close to impossible to keep kids from multitasking in ways that they would never multitask in your live class. I mean, they'll have their phone next to them now, and they'll have maybe another window open in their on their computer as you're doing your things, and so it's tricky. You can't really wait for responses online. You can't wait for responses. You have to call on people to keep the flow going, because there's this sense that eye contact doesn't work the same as it does in your face-to-face classrooms, which might lead someone to participate a little bit if you're staring them down in the class, but it's just different online. And so you can ask an open-ended question and no one will feel the implicit responsibility to unmute themselves and contribute. And so one of the things that I've learned over my time teaching online in the synchronous piece is to just have the list up of who's on the call and just rocket through them, and just, instead of asking those open-ended questions, I just call on people right and left, and it keeps the flow going. Tips and tech for asynchronous learning. This is the stuff that you are going to pre-record somehow or put up or make available for your students before you come together in a live session. So as I was mentioning, if you lecture at all in class, even a little bit, make it asynchronous. You'll thank me later. It's going to be harder now, but make it asynchronous. Your students can consume it on their own time and then come together with you to bring it live, to bring it to life. So you can find the perfect instructional video and embed it in Google Classroom. There's all sorts of stuff on YouTube if you want to do that and embed it in your Google Classroom. Or if you find the other content, there's no need to recreate it. Just embed it right into your Google Classroom. Or create the content. Create the content in a pre-recorded video that you share with them. That's the bucket, or that's the situation that we've been in. No one really does what we do in an industry-specific context, so there's no teachers pay teachers for the kind of courses we teach. There's really no big YouTube gurus doing what we do, and so we've had to create everything that we do for our students. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. But it is tricky, and so I want to share with you kind of some levels of how you can create some content. The very most basic way to do it was just some kind of screen capture or recorded PowerPoint or recorded Keynote. Both of those software allow you to pre-record your voice or voice over talking through the slides and things like that. And so I would suggest you do that. If you're not comfortable face to camera setting, or if you don't think you have the equipment, or you're uncertain of what you might say or how you might edit it, you're afraid of screwing up or whatever, then this is your basic first level of how you can pre-record some content. Use PowerPoint or Keynote and just use the record or voiceover feature. Record presentation, I think is what it's called. And you could talk through your slides and then export them as a video. So a slightly upgraded sort of approach would be to use a smartphone on a tripod. That's what I've got going right now. I'm recording you on my iPhone, and you could use a flip chart. We've used flip charts quite a bit in the past, a whiteboard if you've got one, or a monitor like I'm using. And the flip chart is great. I would suggest you preload it with some things so that you're not all class like this, writing on the flip chart and your students are looking at your back. So if you're going to use a flip chart or a whiteboard, preload it so that you can flow and your students don't have to watch you write. Okay. And if you want to do something slightly more fancy, then you would consider maybe a lapel microphone, which is, it's like a $20 mic right here off of Amazon. It plugs right into the phone. It helps with sound and stuff. Lighting, you might consider adding some additional light to your room so that it's not too dark. Sound quality, if you are in a room with carpet, you're going to be just fine. In this room I'm in right now, there is no carpet. It is a wood floor. And so I've had to install some sound panels here to not make it sound really hollow and tinny. But you likely have a space in your house where you have carpet to record from, and that'll be just fine. You don't have to worry about it. Editing tools, you either iMovie or you can do some basic video editing with iMovie. You can do some editing with other video editing software, but I would suggest you just keep it very simple. Don't worry about making mistakes. I'm not going to edit this video at all. I'm just kind of talking through this with you. And at the end of the video, you might, disagree with some things that I say or whatever. And you'll notice some mistakes that I make and some bumbling words that I have, but it won't be too bad. So don't worry about editing. If you're concerned about going on, just, start small, start short, do, 3 or 4 really quick recordings instead of one longer one, if that's helpful, because the editing thing is just an additional burden that you maybe don't want to have to worry about. So don't worry about that too much, but if you're fancy, you could do that. All right, some more tips and resources for you. As far as screen capture goes, one of the ways that you can create content for your students, if you have some things that you're doing and you want to be able to, and you can do it on the computer and you want to show them how to do it on the computer, then that's called a screen capture. So you will record what's happening on your screen. And if you use a Mac, QuickTime comes with your Mac and it's part of your native Apple software that you can just get that going and do a screen recording. If you use Windows, then ShareX is a free software that you can get and also record what you're doing on your screen. Now, again, if you're just going to talk through Keynotes or PowerPoints, you don't need either of these because both Keynote and PowerPoint allow that recording feature within them, okay? Which is what we were just talking about here. So PowerNote and Keynote allow you to record you talking through your slides and then export it as a video. So you don't have to worry about any special software for that. Video hosting, once you create your video, you have to put it somewhere so that people can see it. And you can't put it right onto your Google Classroom probably. And most websites, you can't just put it right onto a website because there's too much data. So you have to put it on a video hosting platform. And so that's why you see things like Vimeo, YouTube. We use a different one called Wistia. And anyway, there's a whole bunch of them. YouTube is probably the easiest. Just host your vids on YouTube. If you don't have a school account, then just, with your own Gmail account, you can put your videos on YouTube and then embed them into your Google Classroom. So, as far as lighting goes for your meetings, your synchronous time and your asynchronous time, you need to consider lighting because if it's super dark, it's going to be hard for your kids to focus. And so one tip for you is face a window. I've got a window right here. You can't see it. I've got a window right here that's giving natural light to this side of me. And then I've got another little light over here that's giving some light this way to this side of me. So if you face the window, that allows the camera to record from the window and have natural light on your face. And in most cases, that's going to be good enough as far as lighting goes, provided you're recording during the day. Never have your back to the window. Never record into a window. Now, whether that's you've got your FaceTime camera going for your synchronous time or you're pre-recording your asynchronous content for your students, never be at the window and have the camera record to you this way because the camera is going to be fighting to differentiate you from all of the light that's behind you, and it's not going to turn out great, and you'll waste time, and it'll be hard for your kids to see you. So keep that in mind for your lighting. Now, Quizlet. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do some of the things that I enjoy doing with Quizlet in an online format. But I tested it out, and I'm referring specifically to Quizlet Live. If you can run a breakout session, you could do Quizlet Live in breakout sessions. It's really fun. It's a fun way to get your kids engaged in some of the content. So if you use Quizlet at all, there is a way for you to continue using it with your online teaching. So you can embed your Quizlet sets right into Google Classroom with an embed feature. So you can, Quizlet allows you to, in one of those drop downs of your Quizlet set, it allows you to embed things as flashcards, embed them as matching activities, embed them as tests. So there's a handful of ways to embed the content that you have on Quizlet. And then, of course, like I was saying, Quizlet Live is really fun to run in breakout rooms. Okay, next steps, because we need to wrap this up. This is going long. Okay, next steps. I would suggest you assess your objectives for the next 30 days, possibly your objectives for the rest of the year. Who knows how this thing is going to go and how much time you will be teaching online and if you'll be able to get back into the classroom before the end of the year. But assess your objectives, and you really need to think about what is the most important. Try to pare it back to only the most essential for all the reasons of distractions and the limitations of you creating the content and everything. There are a lot of limitations. So take a deep breath, feel okay with paring it back a little bit to only the most crucial, the most essential content. Meet with your departments and or your grade level colleagues to do a few things, to brainstorm creative approaches to teaching the content, to get and give suggestions to each other about delivering the content. So maybe you can even find ways to share the workload between yourselves. Maybe your teachers or your students now don't only have asynchronous learning from you. Maybe you as a department come together and you decide, okay, I have to teach this, and I have to teach this, and I have to teach this, and 2 or 3 of you all have to teach the same stuff throughout the course of this next month or two. Well, maybe you can divide that up, that responsibility up amongst yourselves, and your students can now consume content, learn the content from maybe someone who's not their teacher, but who's also teaching with you, teaching the same subject. That is a great way to share the burden here. Scour the web for useful resources and share those with each other as well. So, and then choose a platform, whether you choose Hangouts, Meet, or Zoom, or whatever. Choose one for your live sessions and get comfortable with it. Possibly you might want to, run a test session with your colleagues or something like that, maybe a department meeting, and get used to the platform because, within the next 15 days or so, you may have to actually start using it, and you'll want to make sure you know what all the buttons do before you get in there with kids. Okay, now it is a major shift. Teaching online is a major shift. There's really no way to sugarcoat it. It's a lot of work, and it's very different than what you do face to face with students. But hey, we're teachers. We're flexible. We're creative. We find solutions to problems, and I know you can do it too. I'm glad to be a resource for you. Feel free to comment, ask questions, etc. on this video so that you can, we can create a community here, right here, where this video is, so that and you can get your questions answered and things like that. You've got this. Take a deep breath and have fun with it.